Welcome to Risky Business. Today, we're going to take a look at the history of Ghostbusters games. In order to keep this video from getting ridiculously long, I've decided to only cover games based on the original 1982 film, games based on the real Ghostbusters cartoon series, Ghostbusters II, the Extreme Ghostbusters, and the 2016 reboot, as well as Ghostbusters Afterlife will have to be discussed in another video. So in this video, we're going to talk about the very first Ghostbusters game. Be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. I've been a fan of the Ghostbusters for as long as I can remember. Being born in 1981, I was first introduced to the cartoon show and fell in love with the 1982 film, and I was very excited when the Ghostbusters came to the NES in 1988. I think this game was the version most of us are familiar with, and it has a bad reputation, but I really like this game and I still play it from time to time. What you may not have known is that this is a port of a game that was released for a number of home computers, and another version was even released for the Sega Master System. If you grew up with the NES version of Ghostbusters, you've been fortunate enough to play the best version of the game. No, really, I mean that. The original computer versions are so much worse. This game was released on the Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, ZX Spectrum, MSX, Apple II, Atari 8-bit computers, and the Tandy PC Jr., and each one was basically a port of the exact same game, with only subtle differences across most versions. What they do all have in common is an intro sequence that plays Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme in various degrees of quality, and often the lyrics appear on screen. Quality of the graphics and sound varied from platform to platform, with the Apple II version having very little music and the Commodore 64 version being the best looking and playing of the bunch. Arguably the worst version of the game was the one released on the Atari 2600, in which there's very little text and the graphics have almost no detail. While every version of this game ends with a sequence where the player must run past a bouncing marshmallow man to enter Dana's apartment building, the 2600 just had this side-scrolling version of that same encounter, and after that the Ghostbusters just destroy this random building. The original Ghostbusters game wasn't always going to be a Ghostbusters game. A game developer named David Crane was working on a game called Car Wars for the Commodore 64. When Activision got the license to make a Ghostbusters game with only 6 weeks to release it, they decided to slap a Ghostbusters skin on Car Wars and call it a day. Well, kind of. Car Wars was intended to be a game in which players would purchase and upgrade a car and take to the streets to battle waves of enemy cars. While the game does feature very short driving sequences, the car takes up the entire screen and all you can really do is vacuum up random ghosts. This origin definitely explains the game's bizarre opening, where it says welcome to the business world and you receive an initial loan to purchase a car and ghost busting equipment. You know, just like the Ghostbusters did in the movie. You can choose from a number of different car models, with the more expensive models being faster and able to hold more equipment. A faster car is needed because if the Ghostbusters take too long to reach their destination, the ghost may be gone before they get there. All versions of this game are notorious for having item names that are completely disconnected from what the equivalent items are called in the movie, as if the developers of the game either never saw the film or just forgot what everything was called and kinda took a guess. Ghostbusting sequences feature a single ghost to be trapped, and during the map sequence, players must avoid the Keymaster, represented by a key, and the Gatekeeper, represented by a gate, as the city's PK energy increases. All the while, you have to bust ghosts to earn enough money to upgrade your equipment and eventually enter Dana's apartment building. But look out! If you don't have at least $10,000 in your account, you'll be denied admittance to the building. You know, just like in the movie. The biggest obstacle to saving enough money to enter the building is Stay Puft himself, who will start wrecking buildings. So for some reason, the Ghostbusters are responsible for the damages when he does this, and you can stop him just by floating over him with your little no ghost symbol. The Marshmallow Man appearances and entry into the apartment building are both hinged upon the PK energy reaching a certain point, but I'm not really sure exactly what that point is because it seems to be completely arbitrary. In the instruction manual for the NES version, it says it's 9,999, but I've never seen the PK energy get that high, and it usually just randomly says enter Zool building at sort of random intervals throughout. I played it a few times just to see if it was something specific, like maybe how much money you had, but that wasn't consistent either. so I'm really not sure how that's decided. So besides emptying traps, you can also go to the Ghostbusters headquarters to revive fallen Ghostbusters and recharge your proton packs, depending on what version you're playing. It's a little touch that gives the player a reason to move around the map more. I think this helps a player stay engaged in what is otherwise very tedious gameplay. After all, didn't Egon say that the proton pack battery has a half-life of like 1,000,000 years or something crazy like that? After the Ghostbusters successfully dodge the Marshmallow Man, they can be seen on the top of the building crossing the streams, and then the game ends. So you've probably noticed that a lot of the equipment is really expensive. It costs a lot more than any player will have when starting a new game, and that's because the game is meant to be played multiple times. You can enter your name and the account number given at the end of the game to start a new game with all the money you had last time you played. So even if you fail to get entry into the apartment building, which for some reason is called the Zool building here, you can try again. The Master System version has gameplay almost just like the computer games, but visually it's massively upgraded. It's by far the best version of the game. It blows everything else away. If you're not familiar with the Master System, it actually had the best graphics of any home console at its time. Now it does borrow quite a bit from the NES version. There are 4 ghosts per encounter, just like on the NES. There's even actually 2 different kinds of ghosts you run into, the yellow ghost and also Slimer, which is unique to the Master System version. Now, the driving sequences are definitely very highly inspired by the NES version, but there's also hazards on the road you have to avoid, and there's no gas, thank goodness. You don't have to stop for gas. That's one really great thing about these other versions of the game, is you never have to go to the gas station. The Master System version also has the staircase sequence, but you can climb the stairs just with the D-pad, and you can use the proton stream to fight off the ghosts. There's no encounter with Gozer, so there's no kind of end boss. Once you get to the top of the stairs, that's it, the game ends. And on the map screen, the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper look like little people instead of like items, so just big upgrades all around for the Master System version. Very cool that you can fight the ghosts on the stairwell, because in the NES version, as you know, once you walk into the building, your proton packs magically stop working, and it is one of the most tedious experiences in any game ever. I think I would put climbing up the stairs in Ghostbusters on the same level as the underwater level in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's probably about how fun that is. So knowing everything we do about the C64 version and the ports, it's a little bit easier, I think, to appreciate the NES version. Not only does it have the best chiptune version of the theme song, like by far, but it's not just a simple port either, and there are some features that have been removed and some features have been added. I kind of approached this, assuming that you have played the NES Ghostbusters. If you haven't, it's a trip. On the NES version, the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper are nowhere to be found. Stay Puft will not come and start beating up buildings. The instruction manual says that he will show up, but I've been playing this game for 34 years, I've never seen him once on the NES. Your Ghostbusters cannot be taken out of action, and your proton packs don't need to recharge. Now, I haven't played this game, I played this game for a long time, and I don't remember what happens if your Ghostbusters take damage while busting ghosts. I think it's just a game over. Or I think you have one reserve Ghostbuster. I don't actually remember. If you remember, let me know in the comments below. But the ghost busting sequences are so easy. I've never had that issue since I was a kid. The ghosts generally won't touch you if you're not completely, careless, or if you should cross the streams. Also, you do have to empty traps until you get the super trap, but there's no recharging the proton packs, probably just because the NES didn't have the bandwidth needed in order to add that feature to the game. Although you do have to stop for gas very often. The driving sequences, though, are really expanded in this version of the game. There's a 6-lane highway, and you have other cars just driving directly at you. And of course, when they do this, you pay for the damages, because the Ghostbusters are responsible for that too, apparently. Even when someone crosses 5 lanes of traffic to slam into you. But the gas thing is the worst. Stopping for gas is absolutely the worst. You can drive over barrels of crude oil kind of strewn about the street, and that will increase your gas. And if you run out of gas, you will get a game over screen. If you don't have enough money to fill your tank, right? Which is weird. So if you run out of gas on your way to bust some ghosts, you'll have to get out and push the car to the gas station, and then of course you don't get to bust the ghosts, and you don't get the money for busting them. So there's 4 ghosts on screen during the ghost busting sequences, and you have 2 Ghostbusters there. You can drop the trap, and then move either Ghostbuster back and forth. And if you have the super beam, or the hyper beam, whatever they call it, you can shorten or lengthen the stream. And regardless of which proton pack you have, you can raise or lower the stream on the other axis. So you can actually move it horizontal, which there's never a reason to do it. But if you do it, you can accidentally cross the streams, in which case you'll take damage, so you don't want to do that. Once the PKE level reaches whatever arbitrary number the game decides it needs to be on, you'll get the prompt for Enter Zool Building, and you don't have to. If you don't go there, and you keep on earning money so you can get the more expensive items, then eventually it'll just reset. The PKE meter keeps ticking up, but then it won't say Enter Zool Building anymore, and you have to wait until it says it again. So I think it's just random, maybe it's timed intervals, I'm really not sure. The most expensive item in the game is the sound generator for $100,000, and if you want to survive the stairway sequence, you kind of need it. You also need ghost food, you know, because ghosts are attracted to food. There's a trick to the ghost food. If you put it in the last slot in the car, you can only buy 1. If you put it in any other slot in the car, you can buy, I think, up to 9. So while climbing the stairs, you can open doors, and some of the doors contain an extra life while others contain a ghost. If you should manage to make it all the way to the top, you'll fight Gozer itself. Now I should mention here, in this particular game, in case you're not familiar, you have to press the A button as fast as you can to make the Ghostbusters climb the stairs. It is horrible. When I was a kid, we used an NES Advantage to do this because it was the only way. You needed turbo. You can't do this without turbo on your controller. I promise you, you can't. So the Gozer fight is a top-down shooting level. It's also a race against the clock. Stay Puft is climbing the other side of the building. And the most frustrating thing, apart from the fact that it's impossible to actually hit Gozer, and you have to hit Gozer 16 times, is that you press down on the D-pad and your Ghostbusters will actually turn around and face the screen, and they can't hit Gozer at all. If you lose all your lives, or if Stay Puft gets to the top of the building before you beat Gozer, that's it, game over. And the worst thing is, if you want to see where Stay Puft is, you have to walk to the other side of the screen, and when you do that, Gozer gains a life point back. Your reward for all this hard work is a screen of text that has a common Japanese spelling error, which is really confusing because the game was not made in Japan. So that's just weird. Now, despite all this, I really like the Nintendo Ghostbusters game. I'll talk about all the things about it that I don't like, but honestly, I like the game. I actually think it's quite a bit of fun. I still play it sometimes. I remember playing it as a kid. You know, we had fun playing it, even though it was a really frustrating game. So now, before I head into part 2 of this, and that'll be up next week, I want to mention 2 games. One is Ghostbusters, New Ghostbusters 2 actually, New Ghostbusters 2. So I didn't want to talk about that here because it's a Ghostbusters 2 game and it's not based on the 1982 movie, so I would be breaking my own rule. But it is the only 8-bit Ghostbusters game that actually has a capture stream and a trap, which I think it's fantastic. You know, apart from this one, obviously. And it's like a top-down shooter. You have 2 Ghostbusters. One is the proton stream, the other one operates the trap with the A and B buttons respectively. It's a really well done system. They did it exactly right in this game, and it follows the events of the movie more or less. Obviously they add a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's actually pretty good. And there's also a version of that on the Game Boy that's actually better than the NES version, so that's pretty cool. And then, let's see, the real Ghostbusters has an arcade game. Now, this game was called Mekyu Hunter G in Japan. I'm not sure which came first. I'm going to find out before I do my next video about that. So that one doesn't have a trap, but you do use a proton stream to defeat the enemies. So that's kind of cool, and it looks really cool. It's a good-looking game. In part 2 of my History of Ghostbusters games video, we'll be talking about the Sega Genesis Ghostbusters game and the smash hit 2009 game, as well as a number of other Ghostbusters games and oddities you may not know existed. We're also going to talk a little bit about the abandoned Ghostbusters 3 script and look at just how close the game is to Dan Aykroyd's original script. So before I wrap this up, I want to ask you to help me out with this channel. The growth is a little bit slow, it's not quite where I want it to be, so if you can help me out, like the video, leave a comment, that's going to help it in the algorithm to get to more people. And of course, your comments and feedback are appreciated, please keep it constructive. If you could subscribe and enable notifications, that's going to help me out tremendously. It's another thing that YouTube looks at when they decide what videos they're going to promote. And be sure to tune in next time for part 2. Until next time, game over.